About the faculty, we have Dr. Bindu Esmoni. She is assistant professor from College of Engineering, Kedangur. She took her PhD from MG University in the area of digital image processing, and her area of interest falls with this digital image processing, soft computing, and machine learning. She's having a lot of research publications, both international and national publications, and that too in very good journal papers with high impact factors. She's having more than 21 years of experience in teaching. So it's our luck to have such an eminent faculty here to take this session. So on behalf of all of you, I welcome Dr. Bindu Esmoni to take the session. So over to you, ma'am.
Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. And before getting into the session, I would like to thank the ASAP coordinators, Ashish, Mr. Ashish, Sudhin sir, Lakshmi ma'am, and the technical help from Shami ma'am for giving such a opportunity to address the students of the entire engineering colleges at the APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. And I'm sure that they have taken all the pains to make the class a smooth one. So I congratulate all of them for doing their part very brilliantly. So before getting into the session, I would like to share some few words. I'm not sure whether I'm able to do that or not. We all know that we are in a very difficult situation. Some may feel some frustration, some may feel some every sort of problem we are facing. We all know that the medical and police team is working with us and saving the team. Let us all thank them with the deepest concern. Everyone is trying their level best, and government has taken an initiative to help the students through this ASAP program. And we all know that the parents, students, teachers are all facing multiple difficulties. Parents have their own concern regarding their students' life, future. Teachers were having some problem because they weren't able to complete the portions, and students don't have enough contact classes. Whatever be the thing, they have to face these university exams, right? So, government as well as number of colleges are also having online classes. So, I'm so happy to be a part of that one. Helping or making the things more clear, even though we are not seeing each other. And welcome, my dear students. I appreciate you, one and everyone, because during this situation itself, you are showing such a concern or such a responsibility to your studies. So welcome, one and all. We'll be looking into the portions. We'll see the fourth module. I think all of you or in all the colleges up to third module might have been completed. Right? So we'll be dealing with the fourth module, and then most probably the first session, the CPU scheduling session, will be handled now. Okay, welcome, my dear students. So the first topic here, we know that in a generic term, we say that CPU scheduling will be dealt here. And things which are coming under this, we'll be dealing with only syllabus oriented portions will be covered here, because you have to face your exams in a fruitful manner. So that will be our main concern. So you know that in the corresponding syllabus, we'll be having basic concepts, scheduling criteria, and the scheduling algorithms. So these portions will be covered. Scheduling algorithms, you'll be dealing with your algorithms one by one. So far, we'll be able to, within this 1 hour session, how much we can complete, we'll be completing that one. Okay. So what is the objective of this particular section? CPU scheduling. And it is the basis for multi-programmed operating systems. And we'll be discussing the various CPU scheduling algorithms also. So these are the objectives of this particular section of that module. Here, I will see some of the basic concepts. We know that whenever you are having a single process system, we say that one process will be running at a time. So if you have only one process to attend, or the CPU will be attending that process only. Whichever number of processes you have in your system, the others must wait for getting the CPU to execute. So this is a system scenario when you face if it is a single process system. So what happens is, let you just suppose there are 5 to 10 processes from P1 to P10 processes are in the system. So then if suppose process P1 is getting, or the CPU is assigned to the first process, it will be executing. And we know that not every time the process will be using the CPU. At sometimes it may go for some IO request also. So during this time, while the process is executing the IO request, CPU is sitting idle. And then we know that the other process also is waiting. Now, when you consider this one, the execution speed of the CPU and our process, when you compare these two, we say that the CPU time is actually wasted there. So, having a great capability, so the waiting time is actually wasted. It is not doing any useful work. So what you can do is, if you make things to be multiple processor, if you can make inside the system, you say that you'll be multi-programming. The systems are multi-programming systems. So we can say that some process will be running at all time. It can be either P1, it can be either P2, P3, P4, whichever be the process, it will be executing. Okay, so for that one, we want to keep several processes inside the memory. Okay, so if in such a situation, 10 process or 5 process, let it be from P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5, be the number of processes. So initially, you just think that P1 is getting CPU and it is getting executed. So just previously, we have seen that there is a situation when P1 goes for, or P1 is going for an IO request, or to satisfy the IO request, P1 is executing, the device request is being handled. So at that situation, if the CPU is kept idle, we know that it is wastage of the utilization. Is it wastage, pure wastage? What you can do is, if there is a method to schedule another process into to the CPU so that it also can execute, then we say that while one process waits, always allocate CPU to the other process. Okay, so that means what? One process is executing, it is in the IO burst criteria, and then the other one is second one, that is, let it be P2. P2 is executing, so that we have number of processes waiting there. So when P2 is also getting into the IO request or some sort of interrupts, what you can do is, the third process also can be taken into the situation and CPU can be assigned to that one. So what you can say is, simultaneously 3 processes are executing. So that means CPU is not at all wasting its time. Every time the CPU will be executing, either on behalf of P1, P2 or P3, CPU will be executing. So when you have n number of processes in your system, you say that the degree of multiprogramming is n, and the CPU will be serving one by one by some scheduling technique. These n processes will be executing so that the throughput or the output can be increased, and the utilization of the CPU is not actually wasted. It will go for useful work. So there is a question: which process must be executed for that time being? So in that case, there is the role of the CPU scheduler. CPU scheduler will be selecting or choosing one process from the ready queue, and it will be assigned to the CPU. So this selection is done by the CPU scheduler or the short-term scheduler. We know that we have your short-term scheduler as well as your long-term scheduler. So short-term scheduler or CPU scheduler will be selecting process from the ready queue. Okay. Now, when you're going for multi-programming, you can say that maximum CPU utilization is obtained. And we know that whatever be the resources, we have to schedule all those before used by the CPU. And we know that CPU is one of the primary computer resources. Now you can say that on this context or in this scenario, CPU scheduling is central to the OS design. Now you know that number of processes are inside your system. So what about the types of the process? It is IO bound process or a CPU bound process. You know that the success of a CPU scheduling, it depends on the property of the process. That is, process execution means actually whenever you say being executed, we can a cycle of CPU execution and it is actually happening. So a process when it starts its execution by a system call, you know what is a system call. So while there is a system call, it is a CPU burst because it is executing instructions. During the CPU burst, the CPU will be executing instructions. During the IO, it will be transferring the data, writing the data, or whatever thing they are doing, it will be. So you can say that as process execution means it's a combination or a cycle of repeated, alternate between the CPU burst and the IO burst. So first you can see here CPU burst, then it waits for IO, and again it goes for a CPU burst, and next it goes for a IO burst likewise. And finally, you know that it will be ending, the process will be terminated by a final CPU burst or another system call to end that one. So that type of execution, system call details, and you have studied in the previous modules. So final system call will be making another CPU burst. So it comes to an end. So we know that the process execution will be some alternate or some sort of cycle between this CPU burst and the IO burst. So this, what about the time duration of the CPU burst is of main concern to us. Okay. So the CPU burst duration of a process, whether it be P1, let it be P1, P2, whatever be the process, it varies from process to process. So if a process P1 is having a CPU burst of 5 milliseconds, that doesn't say that every process will be having the same 5 milliseconds. It varies from process to process, and it varies from computer to computer. And you know that, or we can show that the CPU burst duration is similar to a frequency curve, or you can assign it to a frequency curve which is of exponential or hyper exponential in nature. And we have short CPU bursts and small number of long CPU bursts. See that with the help of figure. And here, during the we are taking the burst duration in milliseconds. That is 0, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, like that. It goes to number of burst duration. And the frequency, how many number of such burst durations is possible. So from the figure, you can get the idea that somewhat 5 milliseconds, you have enough number of frequencies. You have n number of frequencies. It goes up to some 155. We can just assume it like that. 155 number of small CPU bursts is there. But when you come to 6 or 7 or 8, it gradually decreases. Now you see, when you come to 6, it goes to a gradual decrease. When it comes to some 7 or maybe most probably some 6, it is dropping to some 35. Then when it comes to 8, you can see that the number of CPU bursts with time duration 8 is very few, somewhat 5. So when it is increasing, the burst duration is increasing, the total number is actually reduced. So we can say that we have large number of short CPU bursts and we have small number of long CPU bursts when you consider the CPU burst durations. Now we have said that the process execution, it contains an alternate cycle of both the CPU bound operations and the IO bound operations. Now when you are having processes P1, P2, P3, P4, n number of processes will be there in your system. So in that, what are the types of the processes? What types? Regarding the CPU burst duration, we can divide that into two types. We say that some processes will be IO bound processes. Is IO bound process, what is the property of this IO bound process? We'll be having small burst of CPU activity. And majority time they will be executing the IO operations. Okay, so small burst of CPU activity and a long and waits for IO means that majority it will be executing the IO instructions. For example, you can say that during the word processor, when you are typing the word processor, you'll say that you will be entering text into the Word document, is it? So whenever the data is stored or saved, you say that you will need an instruction to save it into the corresponding Word file. So at that time only you need a CPU instruction or a CPU bound process to save that one. Otherwise, input-output operation will be going on. So very small burst of CPU activity will be there with this type of processors, that is word processor or so whatever be the other types of things when you're dealing with that type. So these are called IO bound processors. And the next one is CPU bound. The second type of process, you say that CPU bound processors. Now, when you say that a CPU bound process, it is hardly having any input output. Mostly it will be CPU activity. That means the process will be having more CPU activities than your IO. Sometimes it may not have any IO operations. If you are having a editor, GCC, using that one, you may be typing your programs or your 3D modeling, computations, n number of things are computed there. So it may not go to some input-output operations. It will be computing, so that it will be having mostly CPU activity. So that means what? CPU bound operations will be having majority operations will be CPU bound activities, and if it is as IO bound, the small CPU bound or CPU burst will be very small. Okay, So these are the two types of processes. But then it is not actually a rigid classification. We cannot say like that. Okay. So there are some variations. And process could be sometimes an IO bound at one time. Okay. And later it can be a CPU bound process, or it becomes into a such a thing. That is, for some time it will be using their IO devices, then sometimes it may be using the CPU also. So we can say, or we can treat an example, say that MS Excel you're storing. Suppose your class teacher or class tutor is storing the details of students in your Excel sheet. So what happens if the details of entire students, whether you have some, suppose that 50 students are there and 6 subjects or 5 subjects plus 2 lab sessions, the marks of that one is entered. So till that entering, or whenever it enters that data, you say that IO bound operation is carried out. So after entering and saving all these data, you can say that some statistics may be created. From these data, they can find who is performing best for the first subject, who is performing worst for the particular subject. Likewise, some sort of calculations or some sort of, you can apply some formula or you can create some statistic, you can go for some computation likewise. So at that time, that particular thing is dealing with a CPU bound. So this process is completely not a IO bound process, or completely it is not a CPU bound process. It's a combination. So at one time it will be one type. Here. So now we'll see the scheduler, CPU scheduler, and we know that it is termed as your short-term scheduler. So what's the duty, or what is the process it carries out? What it does is it selects from one among the process in a ready queue and allocates the CPU to one of them. Okay, so you know what is a ready queue. You know that whenever a process is submitted into the system, it will be in the new state. Okay, so when it is selected, it will be added into, or one by one, it will be added into a ready queue. So the ready queue will contain the informations of the processes which are currently available in the system. So suppose PCB 7, that means what? You know that the details regarding a process, it is the PCB, process control block. It contains the registers, so and so informations are available with the process control block. So this is actually stored in the queue. So PCB 7 means the 7th process is now the head of the queue. When you're dealing with queues, you know that the first process arrived will be at the head. Then the next process arrives. Now from the figure it is clear that it is PCB2. That is the second process is following the first process. Now as it is having only 2 processes, the tail will be pointing to PCB2. So it is the end also. Now when you have 10 processes, all the PCBs will be connected one by one and it will be treated as a queue only. Why? Because from the front portion or from the head only you will be selecting, or selection can be in different way. How will you select this process? It is the major concern. Okay. So what about the frequency of the short-term scheduler? How frequent it is being used or invoked? You know that short-term scheduler is invoked frequently. That is milliseconds. So it must be very fast. So when you design the short-term scheduler, you must be very sure that it will be working faster and it will be invoked frequently also. And
What about the queue? The queue must be, you can order that in various ways. You can either go for a first in, first out, priority, unordered, ELL, means linked list, whatever be the thing, you can implement the queue by your own way. Only thing is, if you are dealing with a particular data structure, you must be aware that that particular data structure is having its own facilities or some disadvantages are also there. So whichever is suiting, you must select that particular one. Okay, so what is a CPU scheduler? It's the process which from among the processes you will be selecting number of, from the n number of process from the ready queue you will be selecting. Okay.
നമുക്ക് ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് കുട്ടികൾ ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഫസ്റ്റ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഇതാണ്, ഇൻ എ റിജിഡ് ബൗണ്ട് ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷൻ ഡസ് CPU bound means computing the database to get an output?
So computing here, or the whatever be the thing, whenever you are having a computing environment, whichever process you are having, that is divided into two types. It is not actually a rigid division. I have said it. You usually will say that either it can be a CPU bound or IO bound. But sometimes when you say that database and all, you know that the entry is all, the data will be entered in one side. So while you're doing that entry session, it is actually some sort of input-output operation. Suppose you are taking something from your disk, that is your file is stored in that one. But for the request of bringing that file into the memory, or when you want to deal with that one, you need a CPU bound instruction. To a system call is needed there. So at that time, this will be acting as a CPU bound. So once it is, that instruction is done, further it has to transfer the data from the database. So during that time, it is merely IO bound operation. So strictly when you say that in such type of thing, you cannot say that a single process is completely IO bound operation or one is completely. Sometimes it can be completely CPU bound operation if you don't have anything to calculate. But then very few things will be done there. So when you deal with your database, of course, you'll be writing that into your disk. If it is over the net or in your basic system, the data will be written, no? So surely it needs some CPU bound instructions.
In the example showed before, at first MS Excel was input-output bound and later it is figured to be CPU bound. So what is the overall conclusion for that? Is it input-output or CPU bound?
Sums, I have said it, for the sum time, that is during the storage, that is if you are entering the details of student. Just think that the details of 50 students, or in SAP program, you know that the teachers and the students, which are the mail IDs of that one will be stored, is it? So whenever the information of the students are recorded, you say that it is acting as an IO bound at that time. But when you need some computations, or when you want to find some statistics, you want to select the students which have scored more than 50 marks. You just think that like that, okay? Okay, if it is from 50 marks, you say that you want to find all the students who have passed in a specific subject. Let it be OS, okay? So those students which are received or got marks greater than 25, all the cells will be taken, and from that one, there is a computation going on there. Is it clear? So while doing that computation, it will be, that process is now being acting as a CPU bound operation or CPU bound process. So not at every time it will be majority time, it may be. Sometimes majority will be CPU bound, sometimes majority will be IO bound. This is the concept. I cannot say that it is purely
Is that okay?
Okay, ma'am. You can continue the class.
Okay. Shall I go to the previous slide and make it clear?
No, ma'am. I think it's clear. The student responded
clear.
positively. Okay, ma'am.
Positively? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, then shall we continue?
Yes, ma'am. Continue.
So, we were saying about the CPU scheduling. So, when you come to this one, you know that the process state, different process state it will be there. So, when a process is being submitted into the system, these are the different states which may be taking. So, initially, it will be in the new state. Okay. So newly arrived process will be in your new state. So when it is ready to be executed, the long-term scheduler will be taking the process one by one into the ready queue. Okay. So this means what? The processes are ready to be executed by the CPU. Again, here it is a ready queue only. So from this ready queue, one process must be by the scheduler and the dispatcher will dispatch that one so that CPU will be assigned to this selected process. So then we say that if suppose P1 is being selected, we say that P1 is in the running state. So during the execution of P1, we know that sometimes there can be an interrupt. Okay, so after dealing that interrupt only, it can be in the execution state. So what it can be done? There will be an interrupt. It goes to the ready queue itself. Okay, this is one situation. So during one interrupt, it can go to the ready queue. Then while running, some sort of, that means running means it is executing with the help of a CPU. CPU is executing on behalf of process P1. So P1 may be having some sort of input-output operations or some IO or event wait can be there. So in that situation, why this process is made in such a running state? You can make that into a waiting state and then some other process from the ready queue can be selected and be executed in the running state. So this is where it comes another situation where the currently running process get into a waiting state. After completion of this one, you can say completely the wait stage, that is output operation is completed, it goes to the ready stage for once more getting selected. So maybe at that time P2 is executing. So after a complete execution of the process, something may be terminated. These are the different states. This is the entire thing. So what we are dealing with is on the ready queue, one is some process. Which process to select is that criteria selection is done by the CPU scheduler. It will be selecting one and dispatcher will be putting that into the or allocating CPU to that selected one. This is the situation. I can see some questions there. Shall I answer now or later?
Ma'am, നമുക്ക് last 10 minutes answer ചെയ്യാം അങ്ങനെയുള്ള questions.
Okay. Because in between I found some. Can you explain it again? CPU scheduler. They're asking. Shall I go for once more?
Okay, ma'am. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ എടുത്തോളൂ, കുഴപ്പമില്ല.
Because CPU scheduling is now only I have said it.
Okay.
But in detail, I can say it once more. Only thing is, CPU scheduler means it is a process which selects one process from the ready queue. Ready queue means it's a set of processes which are ready to be executed. Okay. So whichever process. You say, suppose that P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5 are the processes which are in the ready queue. Okay. Which process is to be executed? This is the duty. Selection of that procedure is done by the CPU scheduler. CPU scheduler will be scheduling one process, either P1, P2, P3, P4 or P5, one at a time. It can be selecting. So during one selection, one process will be getting into the running state. Is that clear? And then when that process is running or in execution, all the others are waiting here. Okay. Or in the ready queue. It is in the, not this particular state, it is in the ready queue. Till now, it has not been assigned the CPU at least one. Now, when P1, if suppose P2 is selected as the next process, P2 is in the running state, then it comes into, so while it is running, we know that there can be some events which will be handled, or it can be some input output operation. So it comes to the device, it gets into the device queue. In the previous sections, in the previous portions, we have seen that there will be multiple queues. For every device, there will be a queue. One by one, it will be coming into that one. If two processes are there in the device queue, it must wait. Maybe at some time, P2 is getting into the specific device queue. And previously, if P3 was already there, it must wait there. So till that waiting time, nothing is being executed, no? So what can we do? While this process is in waiting state, some other process which is ready to execute can be selected. Is it? Right now, here we are having P1, P3, P4 and P5. P2 is being selected and it has been running. And it came into, or it got into the waiting state. And 4 other processes are there. So while this P2 waiting in the waiting with the IO device, from these 4 processes, one can be selected. Is it? This is the idea of CPU scheduling. Okay. Now, from the previous figure, we know that CPU scheduling decisions may take place when a process is switching from one state to other state. So these are the 4 situations. When it switches from running to waiting state, just previously, it is from running to waiting stage. This is a scenario 1. And next situation is, it switches from running to ready state. Again, when there is running to ready means if there is any interrupt, it may get into the ready. That is, after the interrupt is finished or treated, it will go into the ready state. Okay. And the third situation, it switches from waiting to ready. This previous one. That is, while the execution, it was asked or it was in necessary of some device or some data. After getting that data, after completing the IO operation, it can get into, directly you cannot go back to the running state. Only from the ready state, the CPU scheduler will be selecting the process. So from the waiting state, it becomes in the ready state. So it will be attached as at the back or at the end of the queue. It will be coming into the ready queue. So this is the third situation. And the final one, it is terminate. If the running process is completed, what do you say? It will be exiting. So these are the 4 situations where you can go for scheduling. Now, when you are seeing that in situation 1 and 4, terminates means what? No more scheduling by this one for this. It won't go for that one. It has terminated. The process has already terminated. And first situation, it is running to waiting state. So from the running to waiting state, something, it is not at all executing. So at this situation, 1 and 4, no more scheduling is needed. So in these situations, new process must be selected from the scheduling is not at all needed for these processes. It will be selected from the new process will be selected from the ready queue. And the step situations 2 and 3, it needs scheduling. Further scheduling is needed there. Now, if you're saying that scheduling is done under 1 and 4 situation, that is the first and the fourth one, we say that it is non-preemptive or cooperative in nature. You don't want to preempt that one. Preempt means to interrupt during the execution of something. If due to some problem, you want to interrupt that one, you say that it is preempting. So 1 and 4 situation, the scheduling is referred to as your non-preemptive one. And the other 2 situations which is specified, it will be preemptive in nature. And when you are saying preemptive scheduling, it incurs actually cost. Cost in terms of number of algorithms must be or some criteria or some details must be calculated, and you have to select that one among that one, what must be the next thing. Likewise, you need some sort of cost is a factor there. Okay. So the 2 types you are saying, that is non-preemptive scheduling and a preemptive scheduling. So once when the CPU is allocated, the process will be keeping it until it releases, either by terminating or by switching to a waiting state. That means what? Non-preemption means it doesn't give up the CPU directly. You cannot interrupt that process by taking off the CPU from it. It has to release that CPU either by terminating. While if it suppose completes the process, then that means what? The process doesn't need the CPU anymore. It is in the terminated situation. So it will be releasing that CPU. Then another situation is switching to waiting state. Waiting state means what? It doesn't need CPU to execute at that time. It needs some IO bound operation. So it doesn't need that CPU. What you can do? You can directly, it will be assigning or it will be releasing that one. So these 2 cases, it will be in a non-preemptive manner. When you say that it is in a preemptive manner, it makes some problems. Preemption means while the process is executing, some sort of preemption is happening. So suppose it results in race conditions. You know what is a race condition? You'll see the problem of access to the shared data. So suppose that a file F1 is shared by 2 processes. Okay. So process P1 is updating the details. Just think about the details of the students is actually updated. Some bonus marks or something is provided for the students. Okay. Those who have submitted the assignments are getting some additional marks. I know that KTU is not at all providing such situations, but for the time being, you just think that you're getting a bonus mark. Okay. So some sort of work, it is being allotted. So students have done it. So those students will be getting additional marks. So it is processing. An update operation is done by process P1. Okay. So suppose 50 students are there. The process, while it is executing, it has updated 25 students' data. And the rest of the 25 is not at all completed. The process is going on. Okay. So in between, if there is an interrupt by the process P2, another process P2 is accessing the same data. Okay. What will happen? It will actually, the second one will be dealing with only the inconsistent data, because some data is being changed, some is not changed. So we say that since the activity is not completed, we say that the data is in an inconsistent state. So access to a shared data may sometimes maybe it may result in some race conditions. And one more thing is, it may affect the design of OS kernel. Now we know that there are two modes for the execution, the user mode and the kernel mode. Now when the user is executing, the CPU will be executing on behalf of the process or the user. When it is executing, when system calls are being done, you know that the system calls will be executed only in the kernel mode. Okay. So while one process or one system call is being executed, if any preemption occurs there, what will happen? When you want to prevent or preempt that kernel mode, system calls executed half, changing some internal data structure or some important kernel data structure, it will be modified. No, so in between, it will be. We cannot predict the situation. So for that one, we don't usually preempt that type. We will allow the system call to complete, or we'll if something IO request is made there, that will be deferred to some time. So that will be happen only after this execution of the system call. So preemption is not at all allowed there. Now, in some case, another case will be interrupts occurring during crucial OS activities. During the OS activities, that is, while it is in the kernel mode, if there is any interrupts occurring, it's not at all tolerable. It makes difficulty. So it affects the design of the OS kernel. So these are the two types of process. You say that preemptive and the preemptive and the non-preemptive one. Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello. Last 10 minutes ആണ് നമുക്ക് ഒരു 5 മിനിറ്റോടെ എടുത്തിട്ട് ഒരു 5 മിനിറ്റ്സ് നമുക്ക് 1-2 ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസേ കുട്ടികളുള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ ലാസ്റ്റ് 5 മിനിറ്റ്സ് നമുക്ക് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ കൊടുക്കാം. ഒരു 5 മിനിറ്റ്സോടെ ക്ലാസ് കണ്ടിന്യൂ ചെയ്യാം.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So shall I continue to another 5 more minutes? Okay. I'll see the dispatcher.
Yes.
So we'll see the dispatcher. The dispatcher module gives control of the CPU to the process selected by the short-term scheduler. Okay. Now we have seen that in that process state diagram, when you have a ready queue, the CPU scheduler will select one process from the ready queue to be selected. And the dispatcher will be giving control of the CPU to that particular selected process. Is that clear? If suppose P1 is being selected by the CPU scheduler, CPU will be allocated to this P1 by the dispatcher. So what are the things involved during that one? There will be a switching context. So context switch is needed, is it? Switching to user mode and jumping to the proper location in the user program to restart that particular program. So do you know that whenever there is a context switch, you say that P1 is to be executed next. So some P2 was initially executed. If there is a context switch between P0 and the P1, if the switching is between P0 and the P1, we say that P0 is, so suppose that P0 and P1 are the two processes. We want to go for a context switch. That is, new process which is coming is P1. And you want to save the state of P0. So you will state the state of into the PCB 0. And then at that time, what happens to that process? It is coming to an idle state. Okay. Now, till that moment, P1 was in the idle state. Process P0 was executing. It saved the state into the corresponding PCB. It's on PCB. So, while that time, process P1 was idle. So, when you want to load the state from PCB1, it will reload the state from PCB1. PCB1, that means process P1 is executing. After completion of this execution, whenever it goes for some other input output or some interrupt, the state of that PCB must, or that process must be saved into the PCB1. So this is the execution. One time process P1 will be executing. Next step, when it wants to execute, the state of the running process must be saved and the new state of the new process must be brought here. So this is actually called your switch, that is context switch. So you must go for that. Short-term scheduler will be dealing with the context switch. Then switching to the user mode, the control will be given to the user mode from the kernel mode, and then you want to jump to the proper location where the user program to restart that one. We may be in execution in middle of some program, is it? So suppose we are completed 50 lines of code has been. So the next instruction to be executed will be the 51st line. So we want to jump onto the proper location. Okay. So this is the things which were done by the dispatcher. And the dispatcher should be very fast and it will be invoked during every process switch. Now, the time taken for the dispatcher to stop one process and start another running is called actually the dispatch latency, the time used for that one. Okay. So this is the CPU switch from process to process. We have seen that one. And the next section, it is the scheduling criteria. It is the major these are all the intermediate things. So as the time is already finished, Subin sir have asked me to take only 5 more minutes. I'm not getting into the scheduling criteria that we'll see in the next session. Subin sir?
Okay, ma'am. നമുക്ക് 2 questions ഉണ്ട്. ഒന്നെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാല്, can you explain, if possible, with an example, why a program in some case is moved to the ready case from running case instead of waiting?
Instead of waiting, it goes into the ready, is it?
Yeah. Why a program in some case is moved to ready case from running case instead of waiting?
Okay. Suppose you're having some interrupt. You're saying in between, you say that during the, if a code is written, okay, in a program, input output, the waiting stage means, say that open a file, okay? Open that file, take the contents from that one. So that means what? It is input output operation. So there is, after the direction or instruction to get into the corresponding address location where the file is stored, you need a system call to do all those. Open file. After that one, you don't need that CPU. So this situation, it is getting into the waiting state. Okay, is it clear? And when you say that from running to interrupt, that is ready state, is it? Am I sure, sir? When it comes to the running to the ready state. Hello? So this situation, you say that if during the execution of process, in some sort of interrupt is being done there, it can be software interrupt or it can be a hardware interrupt. Whatever be the situation, this interrupt must be handled. It can be a division by 0. You can go for that one. It is during the calculation, that one, any sort of software interrupt or any sort of hardware interrupt may get into that, back into the situation.
Okay, it is clear for the student. It's
okay.
clear. One more question. It's referring to the slide 1. Slide 1. It is referring to slide 1. Is it a single processor system or a single process system like DOS?
First one, that is the title. The second slide, it is.
Hello?
Is it actually referring to the slide 1?
കുട്ടി അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇട്ടത്. ഇനിയിപ്പോ കുട്ടി സ്ലൈഡിന്റെ നമ്പർ തെറ്റിപ്പോയതാണെന്ന് അറിയില്ല. ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഇതാണ്, ഈസ് ഇറ്റ് എ സിംഗിൾ പ്രൊസസർ സിസ്റ്റം ഓർ സിംഗിൾ പ്രോസസ് സിസ്റ്റം ലൈക്ക് ഡോസ്? സ്ലൈഡ് ഏത് സ്ലൈഡിലാണ്?
Maybe this one.
ചിലപ്പോൾ
Maybe this one. Single process. See, that situation is the situation where initially we were having only single process system. That is, one process will be executing inside the system. Okay. We were not at all coming into the multi-programming stage. Multiple processes are not at all dealt. From Windows 95 only we have received the preemptive case and all. So only one process will be executing. So in that situation, only after the entire completion of the process, second process will be taken into the situation. So that means there was only single process. It is not the uniprocessor concept. Maybe the student got confusion. One process will be at a time. Only one process. It is not the processor. We know that it is a user system. So scheduling in multiprocessor system, that means multiple is another thing which is little more tough. We are dealing with only single processor system. That is only one CPU. And here this means it is one process. Is that clear?
It's clear, I think. നമുക്ക് ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട് മാം. Isn't CPU scheduling itself CPU? Doesn't it result in a deadlock-like situation?
CPU scheduling, is it a CPU process? When you need some, yes, CPU scheduling operation. CPU scheduling means the scheduler itself is a part of our OS. So it needs some calculations, selection, comparison, some sort of, we'll be dealing that scheduling algorithms, whether first received process is getting the chance, like that some sort of comparison or something is there. So surely it is a CPU bound process. Okay. Now,
Okay,
deadlock,
one more question.
they were asking, if so, doesn't it result in a deadlock like situation? Deadlock
Yes,
means multiple processes will be there and one process will be sharing some resource, or one process will be actually holding some resources, and that resource is needed by the other process. Both processes are having hold of the processes which are needed by both of them. So in that situation, P1 doesn't release the process which resource which is needed by P2, and P2 doesn't release the resource needed by P1. Both one will be not releasing, and both cannot complete. So that situation is actually deadlock. Here, this one is CPU bound operation, and it is done in the OS side, not in the user side. So it doesn't, or it must not get into a deadlock situation. There won't be any deadlock situation. It's not like that. That will be dealt in the deadlock situation stage. It doesn't result in a deadlock situation. Here there is a mere choice. Which process? Whether it is P1, P2, P3. Only one will be taken. So what is where is the scene of this particular deadlock situation? It's not like that.
Okay, one more question. What is the scheduling scheme when interrupt occurs? Also, in the case of two processors sharing data.
Two processors sharing details is it process or processor?
Processors.
Processors only. Okay.
Okay. What is the scheduling scheme when interrupt occurs? Also, in the case of two processors sharing data.
One by one. When the case of interrupt, there is no sort of scheduling is done. Scheduling, no preemption is there. It must be treated first. So now what it comes to the directly what interrupt is being handled, it will be connected, or it will be passed to the direct interrupt vector where the interrupt is stored. So no, nothing to dealt with the scheduling. It will be directly getting into that interrupt vector where that one is stored.
Okay. One more question.
And the second portion, it was something lengthy one.
While when you're dealing with the interrupts, you don't schedule because depends upon if it's a software one or a hardware one. In the hardware one, you cannot.
During context switching, the process that was paused, which state does the process enter, ready or waiting?
It depends upon the context switch. Suppose that in the previous slide itself we have shown it. Do you remember? That is, whenever there is a context switch means what? One process is having something. Either if it is an IO, because of the IO, it has been interrupted, or there is it comes into the waiting state. It can, if it is an interrupt, it directly gets into the ready. That is, after the interrupt, it will be coming into the ready. It depends upon what happened. Depends upon what was the context of the context switch. Is that clear?
Okay,
While
ma'am. Okay.
executing,
Yes, it's understood. It's understood. Okay, okay. The student responded positively. Okay, ma'am. We will wind up the session here. So it was a very informative session, and thank you. And it was on behalf of ASAP and all the students here, we thank you. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.